Welcome back to Three Men and a Mystery. I'm one of the three men, John Lorden.
And I'm Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
Today we have a very special guest with us. Defense attorney Andrew Scarborough will be joining in. Just to be clear with you guys, I was a little bit worried that this might be a little controversial that we're having the defense attorney on. We've been trying to reach out to law enforcement, and specifically, we reached out again to the prosecution to offer them the same thing. Morph, how did that go?
Crickets. No answer. No reply.
No reply whatsoever. Kind of seems par for the course on this case in particular. And I just wanted to ask you guys, in the cases that you've looked into before, have you hit this same kind of wall of silence that we're seeing with a cold case like this between the prosecution and law enforcement not really responding to us?
Yeah, I think it depends on the department. I've run into it in a few cases, but I've also been really lucky to link up with some different departments that were forthcoming and helpful and went out of their way to try and shed light on the case and try and solve it and put the word out there. So I've seen both ends of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely cases out there where the police department's way more open and give you information. A lot of times they'll give you updates, but there's not a lot of specific information. And so to me, I think in general, they don't give out information, but you do see that from time to time.
I think we're seeing a trend developing here where hopefully more law enforcement divisions are recognizing the value of the social media level. And I think the more successes we have in this area, the more of those doors that are going to open up for us. And I'm really thankful that Morph and myself were able to go to the Cold Case Conference and actually speak about this with Tim and Lance from Crawl Space and present it to an audience of law enforcement, essentially trying to entice them to, hey, use this resource. You know, you could elicit some tips from it, and who knows what one of those tips can do. All right. Well, with all that being said, I would like to welcome Andrew Scarborough to Three Men and a Mystery. How you doing, Andrew?
Doing all right. How you guys?
Very well. And thank you so much for joining us here today. Just to give full disclosure to the audience, the three men got together and we put together a master list of questions. We wound up sending over 35 questions to Andrew, and they were pretty much no holds barred. We were trying to see what information we can get out of this, but we know that obviously, we don't want to undermine either legal team's approach to what's going on here or either legal team's ability to seek justice. Of course, we would do the same for the prosecution, and I'll just put that invite once again out there so everyone can be very upfront about that. We would do the exact same thing. We would put questions together, send them over, let them review them, and then they can tell us which questions we can actually go into and which ones we can't. So with all that being said, we did send the list to Andrew. Certain things we're able to go into, certain things we can't, but we just don't want to waste your time, his time, our time asking questions that we know he can't answer. So we've actually omitted those from this interview. Does that all sound fair, Andrew?
It does. It does. And I would like to say one thing real quick on y'all's initial discussion. The fact that the prosecution or law enforcement, has not really agree to an interview or anything like that, that is no bearing on them at all. That is typical for law enforcement. And in fact, as the episode will unfold, the audience will see that we will not go into a bunch of facts or talking about a lot of in-depth things that will come out in court that will be argued about. And so I just wanted to reiterate, I am not surprised by that, and I, in honesty, that's kind of the norm for them.
Yeah, and we hit a bit of a unique condition here. We were just talking about this before we started recording because this case got solved literally, the weekend before we launched our first episode. We actually moved our episode releases up because of that. So, yeah, I don't want to throw any shade towards law enforcement in this particular instance because we know Coley was arrested, then these episodes started. Maybe they just don't see any value in asking for more information from the public, or they're not giving us the questions to put out there. I totally
absolutely. Well, and the thing too is they are as the defense is they're focused on making sure that there is a fair trial and they're focused on their case.
Yeah.
And so, I like I say, I just wanted to reiterate to the audience that the law enforcement and the prosecutor's office in this case are good people, and I would not anticipate any ill will by them choosing not to do an interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one, we just wanted to kind of get a summary, kind of from your words about the job of a defense attorney. Can you give us just an overview about what your specific job is with cases like this?
Well, in a criminal setting, the defense attorney's job is to be the mouthpiece for the defendant. The way our system is set up, not just anyone can go into court and understand everything that's going on. And so the defense attorney's job is to be that advocate, be that voice for the defendant there in court. So that in a criminal setting, that means that you are to go and advocate for their side, for their position. And that's in essence the role of a defense attorney.
So that's in other words, to help tell their story without putting them on the stand to tell it themselves.
Well, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. What I'm, a lot of times criminal defendants do get on the stand. What I guess I should describe it better, but that's some of the wordage that is used by the Supreme Court is describing it, is that the defense attorney is the defendant's mouthpiece. But what I mean is a normal layperson doesn't know all the law and all of the procedural matters and know when to file and what to file and all those things. And so the defense attorney's job is to almost step into the shoes of the defendant when it comes to legal matters. And so they are to argue for them. They're just the same as if you were able to go into court and argue for yourself. And that's the role of the defense attorney. Yeah. Now, obviously, the defense attorney is not to do anything illegal, but they are to go in there and advocate for that defendant.
Makes sense. Andrew, have you ever taken a case where you weren't sure of your client's innocence?
I think, honestly, this is me personally, I try and go into every case fresh. So I try and go into a case just the same as law enforcement does or an investigator does. A good investigator doesn't show up to a crime scene and go, this is the perpetrator. Now, how can I make it look like him? No, they go into it blank. They go into it fresh. And so I try and do that with every case. And so not even majority of the time, I would dare say every time that I meet a defendant, I don't know whether they're guilty or innocent.
And is it necessarily part of your job to come to a conclusion on that?
No, absolutely not. Because again, my job is to be their advocate. And so, in a lot of times, a lot of defense attorneys don't particularly want to know, because they don't want it to affect how well they do their job.
Have you ever had a case where you felt really sure of their innocence, but they were found guilty?
I have. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now,
my sureness of their innocence is not the same as the jury's, and so I'm not the victim. I'm not law enforcement. And so my personal beliefs have no bearing on what should or should not happen to them at all. That's my personal beliefs, and that's it, So whether or not I believe it has no bearing on whether or not the person should be found guilty.
Essentially, you're saying that's really not part of what your job as a defense attorney is, right?
That's correct. Absolutely. Because obviously there's times where you defend people when you feel like they're guilty.
Right.
But does that mean that you should go in there and do less of a job? Absolutely not. If you do, then I think you may be in the wrong field. because our job is not to go in there carrying our opinions. Our job is to go in there and be the advocate for that defendant.
This system really works based on both sides making their best arguments, right? And looking to tilt those scales.
Absolutely. And obviously there is times where a defense attorney can withdraw if representing someone is utterly egregiously against their beliefs, and they don't feel like they can represent that person to the best of their ability, then they can, ask a court to allow them to withdraw.
Have you ever found yourself in that position?
Myself personally, no, I have not. But that's me personally. Now, I'm not saying that there's not those cases out there. It just so happens that either the defendant didn't walk into my office and hire me, or in some instances the court didn't appoint me. I'm by no means saying that there's not those instances, but I just have not run into that.
Gotcha. Okay, so why are there 5 charges in particular for Coley McCraney's case?
In the law, it talks about capital murder is from an aggravating offense. In other words, there is a murder committed along with an aggravating circumstance that raises it up to capital murder. They can also, for example, a rape charge or kidnapping or whatever can be raised to capital murder should someone die during that. And in this instance, that is what has taken place. There's 4 capital murder charges and then 1 rape charge.
Okay, gotcha. Are you and David Harrison working on this case pro bono?
We are. We are at this time, yes.
Was that a hard decision for you guys to come to in terms of taking this on essentially for no pay?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And David and I both have a strong belief in our judicial system. We both value the rule of law and the Constitution. We both place that at a premium. And in this instance, we felt like he needed help, and the family had contacted us, and we discussed it and decided that we were needed here, and so we decided to take it on.
Do you guys work together a lot?
Yes, we do. We've handled quite a few cases together. We work together well, and always have. And then,
what's your track record so far?
As far as cases,
yeah,
I couldn't even tell you. Let's see. Well, we lost a murder case last year. We got another one dismissed. That was last year, but I can't even tell you what our track record is.
Okay.
Our philosophy is we're done with this one. It's time to move on to the next.
And what's your criteria when you decide if you're going to do a case pro bono or not?
I think it's a case by case thing. I don't have a set criteria.
What was the motivating factor in this particular case for you that really moved you to it?
Just the fact that it appeared that it appeared that things were moving quickly, and I don't want to go into a whole lot of depth on describing that because I don't want to get into anything that may be litigated later.
Sure.
But just the quickness of how things were moving.
Gotcha. And how exactly did this case come your way? Was it one person in the family in particular that reached out to you?
Both of us were reached out to by family members. And then, as I told y'all before, then David and I discussed, and and then decided that we would take on the case.
Gotcha. Now, there was a real interesting moment that happened during the preliminary hearing where David Harrison pulled out a crystal ball in the courtroom and kind of used that as an object of conjecture, I think we could say fairly. What'd you think of that moment?
I thought it was spot on. Something that he and I had talked about, and I thought, like I say, I thought it was spot on. I think it brought home the point that we were trying to drive.
It was an homage to Haunted Evidence, a great video series on YouTube. Come on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it was brought up there at the preliminary hearing that all investigative methods had been used, and it was brought up by the prosecution that even psychics were brought in, and so it wasn't anything that David and I brought up.
Right.
It was brought up by the prosecution.
Well, it seems like he was ready for it to be brought up.
Well, you always got to be ready.
Yeah. Do you have that written on a wall somewhere in your office?
It's tattooed on my brain.
All right. To try to get a little, at least as close as we can to the actual facts of this case, do you believe the girls were shot on herring?
I don't know that I'll really get into my beliefs, but just according to what the police have told the media over the years is that no, they don't believe that the girls were shot on herring.
Have you seen a change in that narrative over these court proceedings?
Honestly, I have not. And the reason I say I have not is because it's somewhat been skirted around, in my opinion, during these proceedings. So it's hard to say whether or not that narrative has changed. I do not think it has changed. I don't think that the prosecution will change that narrative, because I truly believe that is what they believe, is that it occurred somewhere else.
I don't know if I would be too surprised if they did change that narrative, considering how strong they were about the fact that there was no sexual assault previously, and now they've completely, changed position on that. So I don't know. I'm very curious to see what will happen in the trial on that as well.
That's a good point. They can shift.
Do you see any counter evidence when you're looking at the facts in the case? Do you see any counter evidence that they maybe were shot on herring, or basically to any of the information that's been put out there by law enforcement?
I don't. At this time, I don't see any evidence to dispute any of that.
Okay. Where is the car currently, JB's car?
I think that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that. That's something I think the police and the prosecutor may have a better answer than I do, because I have no idea.
Oh, so we don't know if it's still in custody, has been kept as a piece of evidence, or returned to the family. We just have no leads on that at all?
As far as from the defense standpoint, we don't know.
Wow.
Now, is that something where if you ask, they have to tell you?
They would, if they have it in their possession. Of course, obviously, all of that regarding specific discovery comes after the arraignment. But yes, if they had it in their possession.
What about JB's clothes? Do we know where they are?
We don't, or the defense doesn't. Of course, every answer I'm giving today is just from our perspective. So, again, I don't want to put words in the state's mouth because we have not filed specific discovery motions yet.
Right.
So, as far as the defense, no, we do not know where the clothes are.
Wow.
So it's possible that once you do all your discovery that you may get some answers about where the clothes and the car and stuff like that is.
Well, we'll have to get some kind of answer. But I don't know that it will be, an answer telling us that it's here or there, but we will have to get some form of an answer. Absolutely.
Is it common in murder cases that things like the victim's clothing, a vehicle they may have been killed in, is it common that is not kept in evidence in your experience?
In my experience, it is maintained in evidence until it is no longer needed. So, for example, the clothes or a car, until it is no longer needed, it is maintained in evidence. In this case, in this instance, I don't know whether or not they have held on to it, or if they have some reasoning why they have not. But typically, in my experience, they maintain crucial evidence, particularly from a murder case.
Well, the vehicle itself is the crime scene. I mean, apparently they believe they were shot while in the trunk. So they should have, you'd think they would have kept the vehicle. Or at least, I mean, if they didn't keep it, they probably really processed it. The clothing, I mean, I would be shocked if they don't have that. That'd be amazing if they didn't have the clothing, law enforcement.
Yeah. I guess the car is kind of one aspect, the logistics of keeping a car around for 20 years. But still, right. I'm sure they have facilities for doing that. But yeah, I think you're spot on there, Gray, about the clothes should obviously. And I would say the slugs. We know there's 2 slugs recovered, and we've got the one shell casing at least recovered. I would assume that those are all in police custody. Do you know, Andrew, about the slugs and the shell casing, where they are?
I do not. I don't know, because we haven't been able to file anything specifically requesting them. But, as far as my knowledge, I don't know where they're located right now.
When is the arraignment supposed to take place?
It is August 8th.
August 8th. Okay. Gotcha. Do you believe that Chief Walker and Investigator Bryan really didn't know about the Barentine case? I was just blown away when I read about that. Do you believe that that's true, that they were giving true statements on stand there?
All I can do is go off of what they said, and they said they did not know.
Andrew, do you think that aspects of the Barentine story are going to wind up coming up in trial?
I don't know specifically whether they will or not, but I think it's hard to tell this story without them.
Well, we'll continue our interview with Andrew Scarborough right after this quick break.
A lot of us struggle with finding happiness, dealing with tough personal issues, and so much more. But you don't have to struggle alone, and you don't even have to leave your home to get the help that you need, thanks to BetterHelp Online Counseling.
BetterHelp is available on desktop or mobile for both Android and iOS. You can speak to a counselor via text, chat, phone, or video.
Find secure, convenient, professional help that's affordable with BetterHelp.
BetterHelp isn't a crisis line, but you can find licensed professional counselors that you can speak to from the comfort of your own home.
3 Men and a Mystery listeners get 10% off your first month with discount code 3MEN. That's with the number 3. So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/3men. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you'll love. That's betterhelp.com/3men. Find help to break through those personal obstacles with BetterHelp. Welcome back, and please keep in mind that our sponsors are helping us raise funds that will go towards investigating this case further and honoring the lives of JB and Tracie. So please show them the same support they're showing us. We're now continuing with defense attorney Andrew Scarborough. So Andrew, the DNA report that seemed like it was leaked in a bit of a strange way. I actually talked to a local reporter, and he felt very weird about the timing of the release of that DNA report. Do you think that was done for political reasons or just to grab the media's attention?
I don't think I'm going to answer that. I think I'll let y'all's opinions answer that one.
Okay. I mean, just to be clear about it, the reporter that I spoke to talked about the timing of when it was actually filed. It was filed on like a Friday. It was filed, I think, right about the time that everyone would essentially be going home that had any type of government position. And then we know, the media ran with it basically that weekend, and all of a sudden the report was everywhere. I reached out to the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences because I wanted to try to get a copy of the report so we could actually review it. I spoke to their attorney, and he's like, we have no idea who did this. And yeah, I read the same thing this weekend too. I have no idea who released this. So it seemed kind of strange, and the local reporter who I was talking to felt like it was very odd. So I just wanted to run that by you. But one of the big,
I will say this. I've never received discovery from the media.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think I know what you're saying there. One of the biggest shocks in the bond hearing, outside of Hilton Beasley's appearance and, of course, his comments, was Harrison attacking the Parabon Snapshot product, which, believe it or not, I think I actually agree with him and most of the points that he raised there about Snapshot. But was he aware that that's not the actual product that was used in this case?
I believe he is.
Okay. I was wondering about that. So was that a little bit of a play to maybe show that the prosecution didn't know much about the product either?
No. I think it was more of a play to show that there can be doubts about all of the technology out there. Now, I'm not saying that it's incorrect. I'm not saying that. I'm not sitting here saying that DNA is wrong, blah, 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 blah. What I am saying is that things have to be questioned. That's the role of the justice system, is to question in a criminal case. That we get back to our very first question. What is the defense attorney's job? If you were in a case and you were on trial for a crime and DNA evidence was admitted, would you want your attorney to just say, well, we accept that?
Right. Yeah, no, I would certainly want the information reviewed and, bring experts in. And I guess I assume that at the bond hearing, it's really not the right time to bring in experts, right?
No, sir, it's not.
Okay.
It's not. And so, again, I think people are getting hung up on whether or not David and I believe in science. Yes, we believe in science. Yes, we deal with DNA and deal with science all the time. And it's our job to question it. It's our job to be familiar with it. It's our job to hire the experts that make us familiar with it. But at the end of the day, we are the defendant's mouthpiece. And I cannot think of one person that you could talk to that if you said you are charged with a crime and at trial, would you want your attorney to just sit silent?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess what it is, see, the Parabon Snapshot is actually the phenotyping, though. It's where you come up with the hair color, the skin tone, freckles, and things like that.
Composite sketch.
Right. But the genealogy is the other product that was actually what was used. The actual research. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think it was an interesting way to raise the question of just like you're saying, Andrew. It's interesting to point out that their products could have some inherent flaws. And it's weird because we're reading this thing through tweets. We're not getting it word for word, so I don't know exactly what Harrison is saying when he's presenting this information. The assumption I was getting from the way that it was being displayed was that he was in particular saying that Snapshot was the product used in this case, and that it's not a strong product. I actually agree with him. I really don't believe in that product all that much. But yeah, we do know in this case, as you just reaffirmed, it's actually the genealogy product that was used.
And Andrew, I had a quick question too, just to follow up on the last one. I know you can't and won't talk about any kind of strategies for what you're going to do in this case, but in the past, in cases that are complete that you can talk about, have you had to consult any kind of DNA experts or analysts that helped you review some of the DNA in cases?
Absolutely. In fact, I just had a case not too long ago where I consulted with one of the leading DNA experts in the nation, as a matter of fact. And so, yes, there has been instances where I have had to consult experts, hire experts per se. And obviously, David's the same way.
With the way that David presented that, talking about Snapshot, could it have blown up on him if the prosecution pointed out he was talking about the wrong product?
Well, I think anything can blow up on you. And I don't mean that to be smart ass.
Sure.
But what I mean is that's part of being in court. And that's part of, the whole court experience, is that particularly in a criminal case, one word can change everything.
Right.
The whole little cute questionnaire that you spent 2 days preparing for that hearing, and one witness comes in and says something that you didn't expect, and that whole little cute questionnaire is out the door.
I've always heard the saying for attorneys that you never ask a question in court that you don't already know the answer to. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And well, particularly in a criminal case, a lot of times, in civil cases and things like that, you've basically done all your litigating before you ever get to trial. But in a criminal case, I mean, one word can change the course of everything. And so, are you prepared? Can you think on your feet quick enough to recover from that?
Wow. It almost sounds like there's this weird, like, kind of sports or game element to this on top of everything else that you're dealing with. Just being able to respond on the fly like that in a courtroom.
Like a chess match of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Hilton Beasley.
Well, I think.
Yep.
Well, I think that's a great analogy. A chess match, and so we get back again to our very first question of what our role is. Well, if you only knew how to play checkers and all of a sudden you were told to play chess, wouldn't you want someone that's a chess master?
Right.
Now, a lot of the cases people do Monday morning quarterbacking in, you can actually see moments where if somebody had heard the way they actually worded, they could have gone in and attacked, but they didn't catch it. And you just go, whoa, they got lucky there, the defense or the prosecution. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Hilton Beasley takes the stand, essentially kind of supporting you guys, supporting the defense and saying that he doesn't think that police have the right man here. And then he starts going into some pretty interesting theories about who could be responsible for this. What's your take on some of those theories that he went into?
As far as my take on it, I'm not get into all of it, but I will say that Mr. Beasley has strong opinions about his theories, and that's obvious. He wanted to come forward. He wanted to speak at the bond hearing. If he had just the slightest doubt about his theories, I would not anticipate a father coming in and testifying in favor of someone accused of killing his daughter.
How common is that? Is that something that rarely happens?
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
Did it get the intended impact that you guys were anticipating?
I think so, but of course, again, I'll be honest with you, neither one of us had an intended impact with that. That is something that Mr. Beasley wanted to do.
Gotcha.
And we told him that yes, we would call him to the stand. Absolutely.
So what do you think is your biggest challenge in terms of defending Coley McCraney at this point?
The biggest challenge is, I think the challenge of every murder case is slowing yourself down, looking at the evidence, and presenting the best case possible. And what I mean by that is, no, this is a court of law. It's up to the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Coley McCraney is guilty of these crimes. That's it.
In looking at this case, have you found any information on any other potential suspects? I mean, I've always kind of heard that when it comes to building up a defense, that sometimes they will focus and try to show the jury that there is another potential suspect or another potential theory. And I guess I've seen it kind of different ways. I guess you could do a shotgun approach where you're kind of just showing all these other possibilities, but sometimes they'll really drive in and highlight one particular alternate theory. But have you found any information about any other potential suspects here?
Well, I think there's already been testimony provided.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know Hilton Beasley certainly pointed at a few different people, or I guess you can even say a type of criminal organization. Anyone outside of Hilton that made comments?
I don't want to get into my investigation of it.
Okay.
But the question was, is through this case, has there been other potential suspects? Well, again, there's been testimony that there potentially is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know Barentine was certainly considered a suspect when he went through what he went through as well. There was a different angle to all this that I didn't anticipate and wound up seeing in the press over the past couple days. All of a sudden, we hear about a man named Emanuel Kissin. Can you tell us who he is and why he's important to all this?
Mr. Kissin is a man that was convicted of murdering a lady and was on death row. From my understanding, his case was overturned and he was given a new trial. And then he was brought to Dale County and placed in the cell with our client. I don't want to get into a whole lot of that because I think that the filings in regards to that speak for themselves.
Okay, so they place him in the cell with your client, and I know, according to at least what the media is reporting on this, that it seems that you guys are concerned that he might be put in there as an informant of some type or to try to elicit a confession. And it is kind of interesting in terms of when his case was turned over. That's not exactly recent, isn't it? Wasn't it months ago?
It was. From my understanding, what I have seen, yes.
Yeah, so it is kind of interesting in terms of the timing to see that all of a sudden he's moved to that center and then put in the same cell. I'm not familiar with that center, but are cells a problem there? Is it typical that you would have someone that is convicted of murder times 2 in a cell with a bunkmate, essentially, as opposed to being held in a cell by himself?
I'll be honest. I don't know what the population capabilities of that jail, and I don't know. So I'll be honest with you, John. I don't know on that.
Okay, gotcha. Are you guys going to look for a change of venue here? Are you concerned about the size of this community and being able to get Coley McCraney a fair trial in that community?
I don't think that I don't think that we will have a problem getting an impartial jury there. Now that my opinion of that may change, and we may file something to change venue, but I think that we will be able to get an impartial jury there. I don't think that I don't think that the people of Dale County are out to wrongfully convict anyone. I think they want to find out the truth, and I think that they would pass an impartial judgment no matter what they determine the truth to be.
And how common is it for you to, an attorney in general, to seek a new venue, and how often is it granted?
That's a tough question, and the reason I say it's a tough question is because it's almost such a broad question. It's really a case by case situation, and I hate to give you the typical lawyer answer, but that's the best answer I can give you on that.
Just curious, Andrew, do you live in the area? Are you in Dothan, or?
I do live in the area.
And has it been rough on you, just kind of being out in public with people knowing what you're doing with this case?
No, it hasn't. In fact, I've had quite a few people come up to me and tell me that they feel like Mr. McCraney is innocent. And I've had quite a few people come up and thank me for providing him a defense.
During this whole process, we've seen that people in that town in that area are a little bit skeptical of law enforcement, and it seems like you're in a great place to be having a trial, to be honest with you.
It does.
Yeah.
So what are the next steps in this process, Andrew? Where do we go from here with all this?
The next step obviously will be the arraignment. Well, we'll have a hearing next week on pretrial publicity. The prosecution has asked the judge to impose a gag order, which we have objected to, and we will have a hearing on that matter next week. August 8th will be the arraignment, and then after the arraignment, we'll have 30 days to file all of our pretrial motions, such as any type of motion to suppress that we may want to file, request for productions, all those type things. And from there, those different motions that we file will either be heard, and so there'll be hearings set on those, and then eventually a trial date will be set.
Do you think there's going to be a lot of pretrial work on this?
Yes. And I don't think that has nothing to do with this being a cold case. That has nothing to do with this being a talked about case. What that has to do with is this is a capital murder case.
Right.
Plain and simple.
At what point the discovery that you talked about earlier, what time frame do you have where you have to have full access to that, and after that, everything else gets started?
Typically, it is most of the time it's going to be in the court's discretion. And the reason I say that is because the time limit discussed in the rules is somewhat of a short time, but it also specifically says that it's within the court's discretion. So just the same way that, it may take me a little while to get evidence together, I've got other cases going. And so I don't want to be pushed and rushed in that sense. I extend the same courtesy to the state. And so typically it's going to be within the court's discretion.
Do you think this might be years before a trial?
I don't.
Do you have an estimate on, are you thinking 18 months, a year?
It's hard to say, and the reason I say that, I don't want to give a date or a time and then it fall through and everyone say, oh, well, he said it was going to be this time.
Sure.
But generally, no, I do not think that it will be years from now before there's a trial.
All right. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. It's really been an honor that we would have someone that's actually going to be standing in that courtroom working on this case that would spend time with us here and to help us try to understand all of this. And we really appreciate your time today.
Well, I greatly appreciate y'all taking the time to talk with me. Obviously I hate that we can't sit down and talk about everything, but this is an ongoing case. And just like I said a minute ago, that I do anticipate a lot of pretrial work because this is a capital murder. And when you're talking about a capital murder, obviously you're talking about someone that is deceased. And in this instance, 2 young girls that are brutally murdered. But you're also talking about another man's life. So there's still another life that's in the balance in this. And so I greatly appreciate y'all taking the time to interview and try and listen to all sides of it.
No, thank you. And I think you've touched on something that's really important to remember in this, and that's we've already got 2 families that have had to deal with terrible tragedy around this case for 2 decades now. We've had a 3rd family in terms of what happened to Johnny Barentine, and now we've got a 4th family tied up in all this. So I really appreciate that the process is there, and we're going to see justice do its job in this case in one direction or the other with all this. So thank you so much, Andrew.
I greatly appreciate it, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. So what's your biggest takeaway from the conversation that we had with Andrew?
I think it was neat to really hear the take from the defense's side in these cases, because a lot of times they're very quiet and secretive, and they don't give you too much in the way of what they're doing. And not that he went into what his strategy is going to be or anything like that. Obviously, he wouldn't do that. But it was just nice to take away a view of it from their point of view, their perspective. And by the same token, I wish the state had come along and accepted our offer to come on, because I'd really like to get their take on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really fortunate to actually have a defense attorney come on while it's still an active case. And, I felt like he was a really dedicated attorney. He's got the right mindset where he'll vigorously defend a client to his fullest to combat the prosecution. I was a little bit surprised at some of the information they didn't know, like where the clothing is, that kind of thing. But that could be something that they haven't provided yet to them, but it seems like that's sort of like what you would get early on in a case.
Yeah. One of the most interesting moments for me is when we were talking about the possibility that the DNA report was leaked for media or political reasons, and him making that statement about it's not very often that I get my discovery from the news. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very, very telling.
We're doing our final season 1 live stream on July 31st, which is JB Beasley's birthday, and the same night that 20 years ago that JB and Tracie's lives were senselessly taken. Please join the conversation by searching for Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell.
We will also be letting you all know how the 3 men decided to honor the lives of JB and Tracie. And we're going to be releasing a podcast version of the live stream we're doing on Gray's channel on the podcast feed as well on August 1st. So no one will miss that. Remember, you can find all the information and links you need for any specific episode all together in one place at www.3menandamystery.com. That's with the number 3. You'll also find contact info there for local law enforcement and both legal teams. So if you have information to help shine the light of justice and truth on this case, please send that in.
And if anybody has any feedback, corrections, or new details that can be shared with us, please send them to us via email at 3men, that's the number 3, at 3menandamystery.com. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter with the handle at 3menandamystery. You can also find us on Facebook. And if you're looking for another true crime podcast to listen to while you're waiting for the next episode of 3 Men and a Mystery, I hope you'll consider listening to True Crime Island. Here's a sample.
Do you get mad when listening to true crime? Well, so do I. If you want a weekly true crime podcast that says what you're thinking, then grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. This is Cambo from True Crime Island, another true crime podcast, and maintain the rage with me. Visit truecrimeisland.com where you can download or stream each episode, plus there's links to iTunes and social media. And as I always say, don't forget to delete your browser history. This is True Crime Island.
3 Men and a Mystery is produced by John Lorden, Mike Morford, and Gray Hughes.
Please rate us on the podcasting platform that you found us on, and help us grow by telling your friends and family about the show.
We hope that you'll join us on the next episode where we will review information that came in from 2 tipsters, info we got from the FBI, and discuss what we've learned about what really happened that night. Once again, thank you to Andrew Scarborough for joining us. I'm John Lorden.
I'm Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
And we are 3 Men and a Mystery.